Thanks for coming to What's New with DataFi.
Cool. Should we start? Yeah. I'm Casey. I'm a partner at Paradigm.
I'm Anna. I'm the CEO at Vana.
And today we're going to talk to you about data and what's new with it. So Anna and I met, in like 2017 or 18 at Scaling Bitcoin, which is a very OG conference, and connected over the fact that we were both mining at the time, became good friends since then. And one of the favorite topics for us is data. So to set the stage, DataFi is this new nascent category that can be thought of as the financialization of data, generally speaking. And I think a really nice analogy is that if DeFi is disrupting big banks, then DataFi is disrupting big tech and the tech monopolies that we live under. And then I guess just backing up why data is so important. So if you boil it down, we think that data is really important because of its predictive value, and specifically, well, magic doesn't really exist, but if magic did exist, data would be the closest thing to it because you basically can predict anything if you have enough historical data. Do you agree with that?
Definitely, yeah.
Definitely. And because of that, we've had massive tech monopolies really take data over the last decade and 2 decades, you could argue, and build these insane moats from it because they're walled gardens that collect this data and then they can use it in a really vicious loop, which we'll get into. So that brings us to the reality that data really is held by these corporations. Individuals are at a point now where they know the data is being taken, but they don't really know what to do with it. I think one fun stat is that we're at a 30-year low in terms of trust of both the government and tech companies. So we're kind of in this precarious situation where we know we don't have control anymore, and then the question is what to do about it.
Yeah, I think going more into the monopoly pattern that Casey was talking about, the way that value is accrued from data, I think, creates this pattern that ends up being very exponential. So you have these companies, we could take like TikTok as an example, and they collect data. Really, like TikTok is just collecting a ton of data where you're scrolling and then they see if you like something or not. And from that, they're able to develop a better product and then get more usage. And that just makes one player so much stronger than all the other players. You see this happen with Facebook as well, even Amazon. And most of the other companies are really sort of scared of this monopoly power, right? Where you have so much data, somebody knows so much more about what their users want, what their customers want, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And that's really, it's estimated that like $2 trillion of the FANG market cap comes from that unique access to user data. And so I think that, yeah, I mean, it's like created massive wealth inequality in the United States and is one of the most pressing problems today. But I think DataFi offers tools to change this, and that really starts with opening up these walled gardens and allowing users to take back some of that data that's usually held in a very siloed place, right, where somebody can't usually just sell their Facebook data or sell their Spotify data. But with some of the decentralized tools that you're able to build today on platforms like Celo, you're actually able to empower individuals to take that data and sell it in kind of a peer-to-peer way to different companies.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this is data has been one of the most touted or talked about applications of crypto for a very long time. I mean, through every single cycle it's been spoken about, but no one's really cracked the nut, and the reason is, well, we'll get into why, but the long story short is now is a really unique time in history where this could materialize in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so in terms of why now, I think one piece is around data regulation and the move towards allowing individuals to be able to access their data from different platforms. So for example, GDPR and CCPA are really allowing individuals to access their data directly from a platform, which makes it so that every service that today has built a lot of their market cap on their unique access to data actually is legally required to give users access to their data. That's one of the reasons why it's really important to build this marketplace in a decentralized way, Because if you were a centralized company, then these data services could block you from accessing the data. But if you build it in a decentralized way, then the data providers are required to give users access to their data. And so that's this sort of piece around Web3 tools and giving users access in a non-custodial way. The other thing to mention is machine learning and how valuable data has become because it's an input to machine learning models. Casey and I both train models on our data in our spare time. We have, she wears like a Oura ring and I have an 8 sleep bed, but essentially you can download all your data and then you can run predictions to better understand what allows you to sleep best or kind of whatever else. And that's at a very individual level. I don't know that we exactly need to do that, more of a hobby. But if you think about, I mean, just the wide array of applications of machine learning. If you take like Tesla, for example, they have all this data that people are collecting by driving their cars. And that eventual self-driving car algorithm that allows a car to drive itself, really like every Tesla driver is participating in the collection of that data. And that's an immensely valuable model to be able to train.
Yeah, there's so much to say on the machine learning point. I think the other important thing is the unit economics that machine learning finally fixes, because if you think about what your data is worth, your one data point probably isn't worth that much, and that has always been a huge point of friction in creating marketplaces around data, because the effort to go get the data and then put it on is usually not worth the raw reward. But with machine learning, businesses are now starting to realize that the value of data is just uncapped and therefore willing to pay a higher price tag, which trickles down to the unit economics and actually makes it work. And I just have seen this so many times firsthand. Before Paradigm, I was an engineer at Google, and we would see how many times that machine learning would actually make it into production. And I can firsthand tell you that we are at an absolute turning point where machine learning is moving from an experimental budget to an actual budget. And that's like a huge shift that we're seeing under the hood. Even though machine learning has been a very popular word for the last like 5 years, I actually think over these last like 18 months, a huge shift has happened.
Yeah, I think to put some numbers to it too, if you were to go out and try to sell your Spotify data alone, it might be worth about 30 cents. But if you were to label it for a specific machine learning use case, the customer in mind has you kind of Tinder style swipe on like 200 images of sweaters to label it with your fashion preferences. That data point is now worth like $25, and that's what a Fortune 500 company pays on the Vana data marketplace for that data point. And so it really like multiplies the value of data when you're able to use it for these specific machine learning use cases.
Yeah.
So then we put together a DataFi market map. Do you want to talk about some of these?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so these are the categories that we see today. And again, it's very nascent, and this is going to continue to become more robust in the coming years. But just to walk through it, so there's like the marketplaces, which are really serving as a either B2C or a C2B marketplace for the data. Then there's oracles like Chainlink. There's also storage protocols, which we're probably all familiar, from Arweave to IPFS to Filecoin. And then identity also coming in hopefully in 2022. And then the data science platforms, and the most popular one today is Numerai, which really does a good job crowdsourcing intelligence to try to solve data science problems. But yeah, we think that this is just the beginning, and there's going to be a lot more categories and subcategories that emerge to make this a full category and subcategory.
I think too, as there are more and more Web3 users, you're actually able to have these kind of consumer-facing applications using these different tools. And so you start to allow for marketplaces like Vana to directly engage with individuals, rather than kind of just tools that you need to know a lot about crypto to be able to use.
Yeah.
So then we had a Ivana Plug here. So our URL is vana.xyz. If you want to sign up for the waitlist, you're welcome to join.
Yeah.
You can also...
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I think we have a few minutes. All right.
Yeah, we can open it up for, does anyone have any questions? They can be on any topic.
Sure.
I actually can't hear you that well. Could you say that louder? Yeah, that's a great
Yes,
question.
that's a
So,
great question.
yeah, I think one way to estimate it is if you look across all the major tech platforms, users across kind of Google, Facebook, et cetera, are valued at about a few $1,000s a year based on their user data, right? But that's where you're only monetizing their data when it's in a silo. But if any company can access the data, there's really a lot more value that can be created from the data, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you can. Yeah, yeah. So you go to Google and you can.
Well, first you go to Vana.
Yeah. So you go to Vana and then Vana walks you through the steps to go to Google and request a copy of your data. Exactly, it's your data. And recently, actually, even predictions that they've made about you are also your data. So if they've categorized you in some way, that's your data too. Frankly, they do not make it easy, but we make it easier. And so, yeah, but I think it'll get better over time.
Yeah. But then if you think about everyone around the globe, that ancillary income can be life-changing, and it's really at our fingertips now thanks to the regulation.
Yeah, so you'll go get your data, and then you'll also label it if you want to make it more valuable and kind of augment its value. And so you could label it with anything from the example I used earlier of what kind of sweaters you like to wear to even like health-related data of how you feel on a particular day. Yeah, Renee.
Is it a better business model for what?
We can like almost hear you if you just
We're
talk
so
a little
close.
bit louder.
Come on up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, the question was, we've spoken a lot today about Web 2 data and breaking those silos, and could Web 3 native protocols leverage the Vana protocol as well?
Yeah, there's actually someone we've been talking to that's kind of like a decentralized Upwork, and there are two ways that they would leverage, essentially allowing them to move data that's today in Web 2 into these Web 3 platforms, but also allowing them to take the data that's created in Web 3 and monetize it as well. Thank you for the question, Renee. So today you get a copy,
Yeah.
but we're working towards a world in which you're actually able to take it and then delete data that you don't want a platform to have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
we
I
love
love
this
this
question.
So what's really interesting about the value of data when you're, repeating the question.
Oh, sorry.
How do we think about inclusion in the context of this data marketplace? And when you're training a machine learning model, the data, you're essentially learning patterns in the data. And so if you're training a machine learning model on people, you really want to have a very representative group of people. And so what's actually kind of beautiful about the system where you're getting rewarded for the predictive value of your data is that marginalized groups who might not usually be included in different parts of the economy, so for example, basically their data's worth more and they make more money for it. And so if you are a member of the LGBT community or a person of color, you're actually rewarded more for your data. And we're able to have communities come together and pool their data together and get rewarded for contributing, where a model might not usually accurately predict based on the demographic.
Wow, we got a mic. Look at that.
I got a mic now.
Oh, nice.
Power. I have a follow-up question to René's question. You mentioned you were, I think, working with a Web 3.0 marketplace that's like Upwork, maybe it's Braintrust, I'm not sure. But so are you saying that your solution is available to help a marketplace collect its own data set and then make it available for sale to sellers who would sell in that marketplace?
Oh, that's a good point to clarify. So essentially, what we're able to do is allow users to directly sell their data to another company. Today, they sell it in an anonymized way, and another company trains a machine learning model on that data. We're also working towards a privacy-preserving model, which allows people to, what we call kind of renting your data. And in that case, you're allowing your data to be used to train a machine learning model, but the company never sees a copy of your data. I think what you were asking about as well is, if you sell your data, can the company then go and resell your data? And that's not something that we allow other companies to do.
No, I was more thinking of providing tools to a marketplace operator to do all the things you've described.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
So you would do it?
Maybe a little bit more context on specifics after the talk, but from the current information, yeah.
Yeah.
The question is forming in my head as I'm going to speak, but I don't know if either of you have read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, but a takeaway from that book for me was that in these walled gardens, we tend to see the advertising algorithms and the behavior modifications of users being pushed towards vices rather than virtues. I'm wondering if you, Anna, have thought about how a more open situation will lead to people being able to pursue an aspirational self rather than a more vice-driven self.
Yeah, I like that question a lot. I think that there is this element, you have the microphone, we don't have to repeat. Yeah, I think that in today's world, especially with the main way people monetize user data is through advertising, and so essentially you just want as much kind of eyeball time as possible on a given application. And what's been really cool actually in building Vana is that we're not really optimizing for that intense user engagement of somebody using the app 3 hours a day. It's much more, how do we allow someone to earn as much as possible and kind of directly get as much value as possible out of this application. So I think very directly, yes. I like the book that you mentioned a lot. A fun fact I learned in that book is that Roomba, which is a vacuum cleaner company, sells data on your floor plans to furniture providers, which is just so crazy and weird. And I think it's interesting because the pattern of selling data and the big companies we've been talking about, I don't think that it's not like they set out to be evil. It's just that the patterns of data are very exponential, and so you end up with these business models. But I think I did want to emphasize that I don't think a lot of these companies set out with bad intent, or folks who are monetizing their data in a really traditional way that doesn't involve the users are doing it out of malice. It's just been what's evolved in the industry.
Yeah, I think another thing, just to answer the question of how this changes with open data, if we can create a culture around being transparent with models and understanding what the features are in at least a supervised setting, we can kind of change the culture around it and start to call people out for being perhaps, like you said, kind of appealing to vices. But yeah, that's a great book, and we see exactly what you're saying. I hope that it changes, and we think that Vana could be the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think with the vices too, it's easier to observe. So when you train a machine learning model, you need to observe the outcome variable that you want to predict. So going back to the TikTok example, it's really easy to observe how much time someone spends on the platform. And so that's an easy model to train because you can just say, okay, how do we get people to stay glued on this as long as possible? But when you have a user actively participating in labeling their data, you could instead ask them like, how happy do you feel after like watching these videos, right? And you can start to build models that optimize for things that you might not be able to observe otherwise and are more aligned with some of what you were talking about.
Sure. I think we have time for one more.
Thank you so much. I've been actually following Ocean when they were starting in Berlin. So when I hear you talk, many questions form. I've worked also lastly with a Swiss entity where it was about health data and having patient data basically available in the e-health more or less folder. And one of the things that always comes up is, can I also control who uses my data? We have also seen, for example, cases where product or companies didn't want to display, for example, their art on this platform or beside another content because they just didn't see it fit. So how far have you also thought about controlling where data is used? You can think of, if you talk about AI, ML, I don't want my data to be used by this AI because A, B, C, D, E. So have you also thought of such number one restriction? When you talk about classification, can I say, hey, if this comes, I don't want my data to be displayed there? And then can I actually say, no, I don't want my data to be used. Every time you want to access it, ask for my permission first, basically.
Yes, I really like that question as well. So we have a non-custodial data wallet, so you have full control over your data. You're actually able to set up a smart contract to dictate the rules of when you'd want to sell or not sell your data. So all of the different conditions that you were describing are possible in, I'll note also the fully decentralized version of Vana. We're kind of on a path to decentralization, but right now you are able to provide that level of control, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, that's the ideal state, is that you have that level of control, and because of the infrastructure and setting it up the way Vana will, you'll be able to have that granularity of access. Cool.
Oh, are we hiring? Thank you for the question. We are hiring, and we have a booth over there if you want to come and talk to some of the Vana team.